Brilliant. So apparently we're live. So great to be able to see everybody. Apparently people can see us on the line, which is great to know. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, it's great to be here, everybody, live with the webinar. We've got a kind of full 30 minutes of content, and then more than 30 minutes of discussion amongst ourselves. So firstly, welcome. My name is Lance Younger. I'm going to be chairing the webinar this afternoon and the panels that we're going to be running through. And I'm joined as well by basically four key people from across the industry that are basically going to form part of the panel and the discussion that we're going to have as well. We're going to run through content at quite a pace, but then at the same time going to make it very interactive. So as we go through each of the sections, if you've got any questions, please feel free to add them on the right-hand side in the chat bar as we go through. And we'll look to answer them during the individual sessions that we have as we go through the agenda here as well. The full session is going to be recorded, and we'll be sharing that afterwards as well. So we look forward to sharing that, as well as basically the white paper that's been created to support this whole session as well. So let's get into some of the content that we're going to be running through here. So as I mentioned, we're talking today a lot about intelligence, and most critically about supplier performance intelligence. So the data that basically informs how we manage our suppliers and improve their overall performance. We're going to break into a panel discussion after that introduction, before going into the next section of content to talk about intelligence across the supplier lifecycle and the key enablers behind that as well. We'll break for another panel before going into a conversation about high performers as well. And then we'll close with a section on what next. You know, what do we do next to move forward across this different landscape? So first of all, let's talk about supplier intelligence and what it is. So basically, procurement has grown, as we know, over the last few years to cover a lot of different domains. And in turn, the data that flows from our suppliers into procurement, into the business, has expanded as well. And we look at supplier intelligence and data across 8 different domains, going from the commercial and pricing information, which we all know as well, all the way through to the leadership and people data that sits within the supplier organizations as well. When we're completing the survey, which has formed the backbone to this research and the webinar, basically we asked a question about what were the most important elements of data and data intelligence across those 8 different domains. And there'll be no surprise that the number 1 domain was commercial and price, and supported quite closely by quality, supply chain and delivery as well. But equally so, where you'd expect maybe innovation and flexibility and sustainability to the highest, a lot of organizations, 10%, are basically seeing people data as being very fundamental and important to how you're managing suppliers and their performance as well. We believe that will increase radically over the next few years as well. And then how does that data come together as well? We look at data across 4 different levels, or call it the intelligence hierarchy of data. Where at the base level, you've got data and data aggregation. The next level, you've got data visualization and information. Then you've got data analysis and insights. And then finally, decision intelligence and decision making. And as you see here, the majority of organizations are working at that state level 3 around data analysis as well. And the decision intelligence, the peak of the hierarchy, is a little way off at 7%. The other important aspect is, where are people gathering data from? Where are they basically managing to basically incorporate data into the whole ecosystem and hierarchy? And that is across 4 different domains. Now, the majority of organizations and people are looking at data analytics tools. A higher percentage than we thought are using their ERP systems. And that's primarily driven by those organizations that have basically got a direct swing towards what they do. And then other organizations are basically taking about a third of their data from third-party data sources, like your Dun & Bradstreets of this world. And then finally from SRM, supplier relationship management software as well. So you can see here there's different domains of data across different layers in the hierarchy, coming from a number of different places, and brought all together. That is basically the supplier intelligence that we're going to talk about within this session as well. So I'd now like to quickly to talk to the panel a little bit about supplier management and what their priorities are. But before we do that, I'd like to do a quick introduction rounds, and maybe start at the top there with Yuri. Basically, good to hear a little bit about yourself, Yuri, where you come from, and maybe you could answer the first question as you do that. What are your current supplier management priorities as well?
Absolutely. Good afternoon or good morning, or maybe good night, everyone. Yuri Hembitski. I am heading the Procurement Excellence at Novonesis, which is a name you probably have not heard because the company is less than half a year old. It's a merger of two Danish companies, Novonesis and Christian Hansen, based in Copenhagen. I've been with the company, at least as a company, 2.5 years now. Very glad to be here because obviously supply management, even though we don't often call it that way, but when I just looked at our priorities as an organization, I think I can see this thread in about 2/3 of the cases where suppliers are key to a lot of our priorities. And in terms of, let's say, our side or Novonesis side going forward, I think it's been for the last maybe 4 or 5 years, one of the key objectives in supply management has been actually robustness of supply, and making sure that we do not screw up our production, because oftentimes it is a lot of downstream consequences to our deliveries because the lag time is so high. That's why, let's say, supply robustness is definitely number one for us. Value, they're never gonna go away. You probably heard it a million times, but they're also for us, they're never gonna go away. It has to be best price and conditions, but not only for the suppliers, because unless we are in balance when it comes to that, we will not have the suppliers anymore because they'll find suppliers to deal with. All the other things in terms of quality, supply efficiency, risk getting high agenda for us. It's it's all of those things that you can probably see in a lot of other papers. Are very important for us. But robustness is definitely number one for us. Over to the next, then Lance.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Yuri. Daniel.
Hi, everyone. Dan Wilson here from Philips. I'm the head of Indirect Procurement for EMEA and CIS. Largely responsible for around 2.2 billion of spend covering all the indirect categories. The challenge for us has always been in indirect procurement is how do you drive value into the organization, right? We came out of COVID and through 2019 and 20. We came out through the challenges we had as a result of supply chain and challenges around manufacturers and chipsets and those kind of things. And even just moving goods and services around. So logistics was a very hot topic. We've got out of some of the challenges we had with our sleep apnea devices and the reorganization and restructuring and a new Philips operating model. And we're now in a place where we need to start accelerating sort of our supplier relationship management. What do I mean by that? It's sort of twofold on the indirect side. We realize we have far too many suppliers to manage, and we don't devote enough time to our strategic relationships. And so we're looking into re-tiering our organization in terms of supplier management, but we're also looking to outsource some of our operational and tactical procurement, allowing the retained organization to focus on strategic supplier management. It also means that we're now starting to engage more on a different channel with our suppliers. It's no longer about costs and delivery, but exactly what Yuri's saying is it's about continuity, it's about driving additional value, it's holding our cost structure as is, but trying to optimize or obtain more value for money, right? So again, we continue with cost out and value in continues to be the theme for us in 2024. So lots going on, outsourcing, a new company operating model, and the focus into an outsourced model, which means now a new focus into The topic of today, which I'm very passionate about, is supplier management and our focus towards our strategic suppliers.
Fantastic. And Laura, great to hear about your background and your priorities as well.
Thank you, Lance. Yes, I'm Laura. I'm from Kodiak Hub. I'm the head of product here. So I have the privilege to build a fantastic platform and work with many customers. So I have a little bit of an overview of the forest instead of one tree. So it's a very privileged position. And what I have seen throughout the industries that we work with is pretty much what the research says, right? It's price, and of course, a little bit of continuity, as Daniel and Yuri says. We have noticed, though, due to this legislation that is coming so strongly in the last few years, that companies are more focused on sustainability and compliance and risk. Of course, because talking about continuity, if suddenly you cannot supply or use a supplier because they are in violation of one of these legislations, we had a little bit of a problem. What I found very curious is like, even if they are a priority regarding data collection, suppliers or customers, companies are not focusing on performance for sustainability. And this is something that I believe has to change. If we're investing so much resources in gathering specific data points for sustainability, we might as well check out the outcome. So a little bit about the present and the future as well, Lance. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, Laura. Thanks so much. And then Malin.
Yes, Malin Schmidt. I'm the founder and CEO of Kodiak Hub, and Kodiak Hub is a supplier relationship management platform, and we place tools in the hands of the most powerful person in the global supply chain, namely the strategic buyer. And when it comes to the priorities, as I see it, is that the robustness of supply has to be on the top of everything, and that means that you have to address three different aspects. One, the quality of this component or service that you buy, because there's no worse thing for sustainability than poor quality. Two, efficiency and cost, of course. But last and not least these days is that the suppliers you buy from are engaged in a sustainable mode of operating. So this thing that you buy has actually been produced in a sustainable manner. And what in this landscape or tsunami of all these compliance and legal requirements, I feel that we sometimes lose sight of the ultimate goal, which is again back to Laura's comment about sustainability performance rather than reporting and ESG reports, because that's not going to move the needle in any direction. So really focus on the outcome and the performance, also on sustainability.
Brilliant. So a great summary there, and if I'm honest, quite a forward-thinking set of priorities and objectives as we're kind of moving forward. There was a couple of comments already in the chat, which it's great. Keep the chat coming about that delineation as well between relationship management and performance management, which is pretty fundamental. You need both. As well as that foundation of solid reporting to be able to move forward as well. Maybe Daniel, coming to you to the second question here is why is intelligence so important to improve supplier performance? Some of those elements that I talked about in the introductory, the different areas of data at different levels. Why is that so important for you?
So in my experience, and I was just reading some of the comments from David and Alistair, so I'll see if I can sort of weave that in. You'd be surprised for an organization as large as Philips and other companies I've worked for that we engage with the same supplier across different regions and different account structures and different relationships. And yet at the core of it, not understanding your supply base and who they are and what value they're bringing to your organization and how that rolls up to a CEO to CEO connect is critical, because you don't know on one hand what you're negotiating with this supplier in EMEA, and we may have serious performance issues, back what Malin's saying, in North America, and yet you're completely not aware of what is happening. because again, not every day are procurement managers talking across the world in a consistent and cohesive fashion. So the data becomes super important. The intelligence around that data becomes super critical. Understanding your where you tier your strategic suppliers, right? Whether you call them, platinum, gold, silver, bronze, or tier 1, 2, 3, or 4. But the minute you start to classify them and label them in terms of what is their contribution to sustainability, to risk, to top line growth and innovation, and the criteria around it, you have a very different focused conversation. And then when you start running these, what I would call, procurement sessions, not QBRs with suppliers, but your internal cross-country, cross-region discussions, you're speaking the same language, right? And just whether you have a tool or not, but just the understanding of the contribution that supplier brings and its KPIs, having that same conversation based on that intelligence is so important, right? Because a lot of times you spend most of your time discussing or arguing same supplier, but there's 3 different types of relationships across the world, right? So it's important to get on that same consistent wavelength with your suppliers.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's funny, Owen, as you were describing there, I was thinking of the classic golden thread, but nowadays it's more of a wavelength. That's a perfect word to describe from the start, which is the segmentation and using data and intelligence to form that. And then that flowing through the level of engagement and exchange you have across the wavelength as well. Yeah, Yuri, how about for yourself?
So you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, so it was a bit frozen on my end. I actually fully agree with Daniel on this one, because through the initial days of the month, and we actually have a supplier conf, and it's been also interesting because all of our suppliers, both company biotech, industry, are the same. The perception of the different in the 2 companies was different to a supplier. Some of them liked it. Others would maybe not so much, or the other way. And it was important, first of all, as a preparation to align, dig a bit deeper. Because of that.
And Yuri, you're breaking up a little bit for me here.
Is it right? Okay. Is it better now?
That is better.
All right. I apologize. I'm not sure something is maybe going on. I would add maybe a comment is not to forget the sales and marketing side, or some people call commercial side, because I think one will be surprised. Companies are also your customers, and if you'll say would be maybe not so nice to them, they'll come back to your sales team and do the same thing. That's why I think not, let's say, towards your third-party vendors, but also within the company, there needs to be a good alignment in terms of which companies are we dealing with. Both as this actually, we have quite companies with very different buying and selling power on both sides, and it's been quite a lesson learned for us.
Yeah, and we see that as well, particularly with more mature organizations. When you go beyond the basics and you're starting to work with those suppliers that are maybe higher in the tier, where it becomes important, because they often are your customers as well as your suppliers, and there's a lot of interconnected relationships as well. The intelligence as well, where you've got that data that's through the supply chain, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th tiers is becoming even more critical to understand the provenance of products and services as well. Going back to Laura, your original comment about basic sustainability and legislation driving a few more things as well. Would you build on that anymore, Laura, in terms of why is it so important? I mean, you're passionate about it, so it's always going to be important. But are there any specific things that you would say why it's so more important?
Yes, thank you, Lance. Yes, as this is something that is truly important for me, particularly, and also here in Kodiak, because in talking a little bit about the chat, performance is no different than a management system. It's part of it, right? We have plan, do, check, act. It's the check part that is so important. So there's a very famous saying, where you cannot measure, you cannot manage. How do you know that you're driving in the right direction? So this is why intelligence is so important, because it's the only way that you will discover that your efforts are being fruitful, they're being effective. So I cannot stress how important it is to not focus only in data collection, but in performance. What are the outcomes of the practices that your suppliers are doing? Because they can have thousands of policies, they can have all of the risk parameters that you want, that if they are not performing, all of that investment goes through your fingers. So this is why it's so important to have a good data collection, especially for supplier performance.
Excellent. And Malin.
Yeah, I'm going to build on that, because I feel that it's such an untapped potential to utilize the supplier intelligence. I'm thinking when you go into a renegotiation of a contract, if you had access to data of the different type of performance that your sites are perceiving from your suppliers' different production sites, can you imagine what untapped potential in terms of lowering total cost of ownership if you can have a qualified dialogue that is really robust in terms of the data insights, but also that are very concrete in terms of what kind of actions do you want to see, and you can leverage that towards, also negotiating price, efficiency, and all those things that also impact bottom line, but also top line, of course.
Yeah, and it's interesting again how you describe that, the qualified conversation, because it does, it enriches the conversation that you're having, and it takes it beyond being kind of basically qualitative and often emotional and relationship to basically being quantified as well, which equates to qualified as well. So clearly, there's a lot of basic priorities. I would say many of the priorities we've talked about here range from basically the kind of the basic premise of good supplier management through to some more of the advanced activities, and supplier performance intelligence feels like a core element of progressing. What I'm going to flip now to is a bit more of the research that we took over the last couple of weeks as well, and take a look at the end-to-end supplier life cycle as well. So what you see from top to bottom here is the supplier management life cycle. It goes from the top of the cycle, from category strategy all the way through to sourcing and supplier offboarding. And when we asked the respondents, they said, well, where do they apply intelligence and data the most? Now, what was quite positive about this is that the responses we got from over 100 different people basically was fairly representative of what we'd have expected. Very, very positive that organizations are using data at the start of the cycle, when you look at category strategy and goal setting as well, and then using data again heavily in the pre-qualification and assessment as well. It's another mini spike around supplier segmentation. Going to Daniel, to your point there about segmenting suppliers in the right way, because then that will shape how you manage suppliers going forward, and then going on as well. Now, the couple of observations around exceptions to this is maybe not as much data used around supplier offboarding. It's done, and then positive that basically only a small minority of people don't use data anywhere at all, which surprised me with 4% of people at the bottom here as well. There's an opportunity maybe to increase all of these scores across the board, in terms of where the application is, because what we're seeing is potentially there could be a shift across the board to the right, all these areas. Now, if we dive a little bit into the actual work that you do with suppliers themselves, it's important to kind of look at basically the implementing corrective actions with suppliers as well, where data is actually being applied. So this is the actual activity of once you've found an issue or you're looking to improve performance, then where do you act as well? So most organizations are working on KPIs, measuring and monitoring, the classic sort of reporting side of things. There is an opportunity for more organizations to do more when you talk about collaborative problem solving using data, and then taking it a stage further, actually looking at innovation and what you do when you're driving innovation and beyond that as well. So what are organizations doing to basically enable better performance and better data as well? Well, a couple of things stand out here at the top four. So most organizations that are looking to enable higher performance are looking at building out the correct data infrastructure and the correct data capabilities. They're then looking beyond that to look at improving the skills of their organization as well. And then in turn, embedding data management across their digital procurement solutions. Note the fact here that it's about the data in the digital solutions that's being called out specifically, as opposed to just the solution themselves. Because a platform without data maybe works well from a process perspective, but probably won't be a very intelligent process without strong data as well. And then the fourth one, which we're seeing increasing quite significantly, is tighter working together with data and the digital teams. We're seeing this across all capability areas, not just supplier management, but it's fundamentally important that your IT and digital teams work hand in hand with the procurement team on your digital platform and digital solutions as well. Now, some of the areas at the tail here where organizations aren't doing as much is okay, because some of these are kind of enabling activities that are very bespoke. They're done in conjunction with other activities. So that, for example, recruiting non-procurement people or basically outsourcing non-core activities, they're part of a mixture of enabling strategies that organizations need to take. You can't do them all, so you need to prioritize the right set of enabling actions to enable you to have high performance as well. So back to the panel to basically discuss a couple of key questions here as well. First question, Yuri, for yourself here is, what does best-in-class supplier performance intelligence look like? So when do you know that you've got outstanding performance?
It's I think it's a question with many answers potentially, but let's say, at least in our context, let's start being quite modest. Our minimal requirement is that all the hard work that category managers or buyers or senior buyers are doing in terms of arranging for the SLAs, the terms and conditions, is being met 100%. So the supplier has to kind of meet all the commitments done during the negotiation phase, during the post-negotiation phase, and so on. So this is the, let's say, our, maybe it's not best-in-class performance, this is the expected performance, and it's already, let's say, good-in-class performance. Mm-hmm. Best-in-class is, of course, when suppliers go above and beyond it. In this case, would be, let's say, related, in our case at least, the two important items is innovation, both in material/product innovation, but and sustainability. Since we are one of the first customers to be SBTi certified in terms of our, let's say, green targets, if I may say so, it's very important for us that suppliers come up with ideas for us, but also for themselves to improve on the Scope 3 data, but also come up with innovative ideas so we can drive the improvements in our value chain, so that we can also drive improvements in our customer value chain, so that we become a great supplier to them. So to me, meeting the base requirements that I have gone.
We've lost you a little bit, Yuri, there, unfortunately. So I'm going to jump quickly on to Daniel to get your input, Daniel, here on what does best in class look like for you?
Oh, sorry, Yuri was coming back. No? Okay. So for me, it's very simple, right? I mean, in today's age of explosion of AI, ChatGPT, and all these niche tools, I think I'm cautious about the term best in class, right? What is best in class isn't necessarily good for all organizations. I keep coming back to, what's in it for my stakeholder, right? And how is he meeting or she meeting their business objectives and targets? And are we procurement enabling that in collaboration with our suppliers? I'm a big believer in a single source of truth, right? I think when we talk about contingent workforce and the use of a technology platform where all contingent worker data sits on one platform, to me, it should be the same thing in terms of how are you measuring, managing your supply base, right? And you can have a different platform for directs and another platform for indirects, but I still believe in that single source of truth. The minute you start going to Excel-based, PowerPoint, something on my desktop, someone creates a ChatGPT tool or something, then you have this, sporadic way of capturing the data, and it's just, you just can't compare it. It's just not even usable or manageable, and forget about talking about integrating it into an ecosystem or S2Pay platform or EcoVadis or any of these things. So I keep coming back to a single source of truth. Hopefully a digitally enabled platform and not Excel, right?
Yeah, perfect. I think that's it's a cornerstone and a nice segue to you, Laura, to talk about what you would see does best in class look like, and you can't give the same answer as Daniel.
I cannot agree more. I cannot agree more with Daniel. It's 100%. Best in class is simplicity. We need to democratize the data. Because if you have a Wall Street dashboard looking type, right, with all of the screens, all of this data, box and whiskers and histograms and all of these bell charts, you get data fatigue and your stakeholders freeze. They cannot make decisions. Everything should be simple in one place so you can going back to the pyramid. It's so important to see the data in their ecosystem so you can gather information from there. So I hope that there is not the same answer, Lance, but I cannot agree more with Daniel. That's what best in class looks like, simplicity.
No, that's all right. That's all right. It was good. A slightly different angle in terms of that simplicity side of things as well. And for you, Malin, what does best in class supply performance?
I'm going to tie it into what Laura said. I think it's really, it's tied to the fact that we try to make something very complex simple, but that requires that we also respect the complexity. And that complexity entails data sources that's normally lost. For instance, in-company unstructured data that appears when you visit a supplier factory or when you do a supplier audit, or we have an exchange around a claim. That's also very important data points to understand whether the supplier is going to continue to perform or not perform, or whether they meet the demands currently and will in the future meet the demands. So, taking all this complexity and actually, turning it into something that you can act quite quickly on, and based on one source of truth. I'm so aligned with what you're saying, Daniel. It's so important.
And going to you, Daniel, then what are the key enablers to achieving the high performance? How do you create the biggest impact?
So I come back to customer requirements, right? I mean, too many times, and especially today, right? You're seeing more and more tools that are not just procurement centric, but they're really business centric, and quite the opposite is happening, right? You see there is opportunities because source to pay platforms can't do it all, and you need these niche tools and products. And so again, I keep coming back to what's the pain point of my customer? What's the problem they're trying to solve, right? And not throw a tech or a platform or a solution at something, but really understand what is their requirements. I think so. Again, asking the right questions is a key enabler, right? That conversation. Conversations with the suppliers. I think too many times we treat suppliers as vendors, right? And we don't engage them in a conversation about, hey, what does good performance look like? What does X, Y, and Z look like? How do we bring the supplier into the conversation, right? It's a three-way dialogue between procurement, between the supplier, and between the stakeholder, and to manage that. And again, I think it's a mindset change, right? As an organization, you need to think differently about how you view suppliers. Tiering them into tier 1, 2, 3, or 4 platinum doesn't do anything if you don't treat them differently, right? How you collaborate with one supplier who's very strategic is very different how you might collaborate with an operational supplier and, for instance, office supplies. And especially if you're talking about driving innovation, new product development, then the conversations are deeper and the conversations go actually much longer. So you're flipping the narrative with these QBRs from, hey, we're going to do performance every quarter and then once a year innovation, to the performance stuff should be taken care of by AI and tools and processes. And it's a 10-minute discussion. Every quarter, the conversation should be about innovation, sustainability, how the organization's joint objectives are being met on diversity, the climate, all those kind of things. So hopefully I've just articulated a little bit about some of the enablers, right? Again, it's about understanding requirements, understanding a little bit about the mindset of the organization, the business challenges, to me are all really, really key.
Can I just to explore a little bit on that, the mindset change, because everybody, the tiering of suppliers has existed for decades as well, and it's been deployed to different degrees. But I 100% agree with it's a mindset change. But any tips on how you can achieve that mindset change, Daniel?
It starts by so again, to me it comes around communication, right? I think, again, what's the problem we're trying to solve? How do we solve the problem? What does a strategy look like? So again, we use category strategies, I think, are a great tool, but not the procurement centric. We're in our own sort of ivory tower building strategies. It's about, hey, how do we co-create with the business about a short, medium, and long-term strategy? What do we want to achieve as an organization? And you're not talking about tools and tenders and RFPs and whatever. It's that conversation, right? And I think that's where you need to get to in terms of saying, hey, I want to address these points. So how do we co-create? How do we collaborate? Yeah. And so I think these partnerships require face-to-face, they require commitment, they require funding, they require a real honest and joint effort, right? And again, I keep coming back to, let's not meet once a year and have a conversation about growing revenue and innovation, but again, it's a continuous improvement on those discussions.
Fantastic. I've given you you've just introduced the 6 C's, Daniel. You didn't know it, but we had communication, co-creation, common goals, conversation, collaboration, and commitment. So you heard it here first, everyone. That's how you make a mindset change. So I love it. I love it. And Laura, coming to you, what enablers, and it can't be a digital solution, create the biggest impact as well?
Well, maybe taking a little bit of a left turn, I want to focus a little bit on quality, on the data.
Okay.
So for me, the biggest enabler is data quality and accessibility. Okay. If you have good data, you will be able to have good decisions, right? And being able to have those actual incomes. What we have seen in all of these solutions and out there is just too much information. There's too much information out there. And we don't know what is real and what is not. And coming back to Daniel and this change of mindset, this is why it's so important to go straight with the supplier and have a relationship with them to make sure that we're going to the source. So data quality is extremely important, but also accessibility. The performance data, the supplier intelligence should not live with the data analyst alone. It should be every strategic buyer should be able to see it and understand it very easily so they can have decisions in every single stage of their supplier life cycle. and make those decisions, right? Take those actions. And that's when you see the change. So it's not only about the change of mindset about collaborating with the supplier, it's also about how you use the data in every single step.
And I'm going to just push you a little bit on the second point you said there, which is a really great one. Not only being able to see it, but being able to understand it. And so what are you seeing organizations doing to help themselves to be able to understand the data?
Well, actually, Lance, that's my main concern. And you see it on the research, right? Why are we investing so much in data analytics and not in decision making?
Okay.
And I believe it's because companies are very focused on, I want this tool, I want AI, I want this, and that. And as Daniel says, they're not focusing on what they want to accomplish. If they focus on what they want to accomplish, the indicators come very easily. And standardization as well is so important, as Daniel mentioned. You have global companies in different areas, and they have very different outlooks in the same supplier because we don't have that standardization. Okay. So it's more about where we're moving forward. We have all these tools. How are we going to build the house? In what foundation?
Okay, great. And then Malin, finally to yourself in terms of what enables.
I'm so impressed by it. Was it 6C or 5C? What was it?
6 Cs.
6C, yeah.
You're gonna add some more?
No. It's all very good, but it's also quite expensive. So I would like to really highlight one aspect, which I think is super underused in most companies, which is a very thorough supplier segmentation based on empirical data, not only spend or only risk, but actually past performance that actually initiates, these 6C activities where that time should be spent and where it's well spent. And I think, again, how do you use the data? I think so many companies are not using it to segment so they can prioritize correct. So they spend their time where they get most bang for the bucks. So that's something that that's an enabler which is unused or underused, I would say. And that goes far beyond just a category tree or like a spend analysis. It's really relying on much larger data set that you can sort of use to boil things down to the mere essentials. And then you can go on the 6C with the right suppliers.
Yeah, definitely. The focus is an imperative. It is critical. Segmentation helps with that and allows you to double click into different points as well.
Hey, and Lance, I'll add a 7th C in there. When you do all those 6 things correctly, you have another C called credibility.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing for procurement today is credibility, and therefore it's why the how you apply the 6 Cs or any other methodology, around change management, transformation. There's so much out there on LinkedIn. Everything to me is about credibility in our profession, right? And when you do something right, just the one thing, communication. If you do communication right about what you're doing and why you're doing it, it builds credibility. And then the next step is, the next thing. And so for me, it's always about credibility of the function, and the organization is the most important thing.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to move on to the next section here, final section of sort of inputs as well. And so what we saw when we did the research in terms of the impact of supplier performance intelligence and the value created for procurement was, funnily enough, number one, and I don't think you did this on purpose, was credibility. The expected outcome from having better information is credibility and business engagement. Second highest on the list here was productivity, then supplier resilience, experience, and policy. And interesting enough, you've got savings, sort of relatively low down the list. Now, granted, it has high some impact, but relatively low on the list of how this intelligence improves the performance as well. The additional lens that we applied on this when we were looking at the basically the data was what do high-performing organizations do, and how do high-performing organizations basically work with them spend intelligence. The first thing, and what was universal, was basically that we had 100% of basically high performers were using 3 or more methods to integrate supplier performance data. So you remember that from the start, whether it be pulling information from your ERP system, from third-party data sources, from SRM platforms. Basically, they're using 3 or more data sources. 89% are leveraging supplier performance data for risk management and action planning. So the resolution of issues, but also action planning of the back end of that as well. Over 4 out of every 5 or 8 out of every 10 have higher impact upon supplier experience and collaboration. And then finally, they're incorporating it into their sort of performance-based incentive models as well. Critical, I guess, for the outcomes that you're looking to drive as well. So a few different things that you're seeing as outcomes from basically the supplier intelligence as well. And I'd like just now to flip to the panel for one last session here to talk about, where we should be prioritizing activities and what things will look like in the future as well. So Yuri, I'll jump to you to talk about the first question here. Is how should organizations prioritize improving supplier performance intelligence? Where should they start?
I think, well, first of all, apologies for dropping off. I had some technical issues.
Oh, good.
I think now it's all right. Let's say organization in this case, I think we need to define whether it is function that we're talking about, in this case, procurement or sourcing, or is it an organization at large, which is with sales and marketing. So from our side, I'll start with the function. So let's say the overall procurement, direct, indirect, whatever it may be. In this case, as has been mentioned maybe 20 minutes ago, the single kind of landing page, or what we call the kind of one kind of source of truth or dashboard, is where we need to link in all the solutions that we are using as an organization, at least speaking from our side, whether it's contract lifecycle management, whether it is spend analytics, or whether it is say supplier facing solutions. We want to have you can say like a cockpit environment where the end users, in this case category managers, buyers, senior buyers, have one point of access. Then what we do in our case is we actually just reach out with either one-on-one chats or with a questionnaire in terms of what exactly are they looking for that is not yet available to them, because right now we have quite a number of tools available to them. What exactly are they looking for that will help them gain this extra kind of angle, extra benefit in their negotiation with suppliers, whether it be cost modeling, whether it be predictive analytics on raw materials market development or whatnot. But what we've seen as a number one priority so far is that they want a single location, like a cockpit, where they can collect a number of data points at the same time, rather than go and search for them and then kind of lose track of what they were doing. So at least that's on our side. And then, of course, when we talk organization at large, then we integrate the same with a sales organization. Because a lot of data sources are similar, a lot of players are similar, and they want to make sure that we connect, let's say, the customer demand with the supply market capabilities, and then take decisions based on that. And that's what we want to do it in one flow, and that's what we're doing it in one flow. I mean, it's not completely done, but bit by bit, we're building out that.
Yeah, and for your organization, that's critical. That one flow.
It is very critical, especially with the lead time. Oftentimes we have months and months of lead time. So it is. I think if the butterfly is not really flying here, it might be quite a huge effect down the line, and it can be 3, 4, 5 months down the line that it kind of hits. Yeah. And especially when you're working at capacity or close to, that's definitely let's say a risky one, and something you need to really look into. That's why we don't call ourselves procurement and the other guys commercial, because we're all commercial. It's just how do you look at it? More supply facing and more sales facing.
I understand. And Daniel, for you, what would you prioritize improving?
So in a company as large as Philips and the complexity it has, and probably any organization, right? It's not just Philips, but any of the company they work for. It's certainly what I've learned in the past, right? You just don't throw technology at something, right? And I know we talk about procurement garages and, you know, these incubation places where you can test tech. I think that's great. That has to happen. But I would start with, hey, who's my most successful customer and what's their business challenge? And then start small, right? And see where they have a performance problem, either a supply chain or innovation or risk or whatever, and really try to understand what the pain point is, how we can potentially pilot solutions, and how to get them to pay for it, right? The challenge we always have, or at least I felt in my procurement career, is we're not the ones with the money. We spend other people's money. And the challenge is we have such constrained budgets around, and maybe it's other organizations don't, but certainly my experience, I've worked for organizations with constrained procurement budgets, but yet the business has got, you know, a treasure chest of money. So how do you become smarter and say, let me get the business to buy this. Let me get the business to pilot it. Let me facilitate the collaboration between other third parties, because I know the marketplace, I know which suppliers could or could not be suitable. How do you co-create, pilot something, and start small and get a success, right? And celebrate the success and say, wow, that's great. Procurement did a great job. The supplier did a great job. I get the value that I see out of performance intelligence data. Wow, I didn't know this existed. How do we build on it? How do we expand? And then next thing you know, it starts to go across other business segments and other parts of the organization, and the adoption then really starts to go. And I'm seeing more and more of that, right?
Yeah. And I 100% agree that, you know, and it goes back to where we start with the hierarchy of intelligence. Many organizations are doing the data aggregation, visualization to get the basics in place. But the way that they really scale that is doing what you said, was then find the customer pain point or the customers being successful. And that becomes where you do something different, something differentiated, something that they want. I love the acid test there. How much are they prepared to pay? Because that can flow not only into the organization, but the data you maybe need outside of the organization to basically answer that as a question as well. Laura, I was going to jump to you for a quick 30-second answer, if we could, on prioritization.
Yes, I think, again, I agree with Daniel 100%. The only thing I will add is focus on noise reduction. Focus on what is important. Instead of gathering a lot of data points, find what you want to accomplish and the way to measure it.
Perfect. That's it. And then Malin?
Yeah, I think there's so many companies that has not aligned on the most basics. What is the acceptance criteria for excellence? What don't we accept? What is poor? So really setting, where do we want to end? What's the end game in terms of the goals, the category strategies, and so forth? And I think there's a lot of misalignment out in the organization across BAs, but also within BAs. You know, how do you view excellence?
Okay, and it's a nice segue into, well, what will the future look like? So
I can continue and then you don't have to. I can, my data will just become cheaper and more available. So in the future, it's not having access. That's not going to be the problem. It's the sense making. And I think Laura said it over and over again: simplicity, availability. And I think that's an absolutely must if we are to move away from the Excels and the manual work of the world and the just using emails and so forth.
Perfect. And then Laura?
I think there's two ways. One where the tools is going to overwhelm the user, or one where the user owns the tools. I truly hope it's the second. But to do that, we need to push the users to know exactly what they need. Instead of looking for a solution, let's look at the goal, and then we can figure out how we go there. But there are going to be more and more tools. AI is expanding every single day. So I can see more data, more future data, more predictive analytics, machine learning algorithms that will allow strategic buyers to have a little bit of a crystal ball for their suppliers.
Perfect. Then Yuri.
Yeah, from my side, I would say that there'll be, well, hopefully, and most likely, fewer tools and more agents. Yeah, so in this case, what I would just call it, work will not feel like work, so that the people will not be chasing the tools and making sure that you can find the information in each particular tool, but actually you'll pull the data you need on demand. It will be quick, and you just need, you're just gonna get what you need very quickly, and then move on with your relationship building, with actually focusing on the business problems, on the stakeholder problems, rather than on chasing the data. So I'll say I would envision the data on demand from whatever tools, and then so that that person keeps on focusing on the problems rather than on data chasing.
And then Daniel.
So Lance, I don't know how supplier management will evolve in the near future, but I do hope, I come back to what Malin said, simplicity, right? One of the biggest challenges we have is some of the tools that we use today are too complex. It turns people off. It takes too long to do an e-sourcing event in Ariba, for example, or whatever. The same could happen with some of these new and emerging tools, right? It could create a sense of, oh, wow, this is replacing my job, or I don't know how to use it, or I haven't got the time, and I'm just going to go back to the basics, right? I'm going to use my PowerPoint. I'm going to upload some information. And so I really hope it comes to simplicity, right? The ease of use, the user experience. I'm a big believer in that, right? The simpler things are, let AI, let tools, let technology do all the number crunching behind. And hopefully with the use of AI gives you that sense of the intelligence, right? I think humans still need to massage and manage it, but I hope there is some sense of, oh, this is simple. And this is going to make my life easier, that I want to use the tool, I want to leverage it, versus saying, oh, this is going to take over my job, which it won't, right? And we all have this sort of fear through media or social media. And so I hope, again, simplicity, simplicity, simplicity.
Fantastic. Now, we had one final question from the audience before we kind of close out the session, and it was one for you, Malin, is that if segmentation is helping to set resource priorities, how do you think about segmenting the suppliers you don't deal with today, as they may be your future?
Yes, because you need to start to connect the dots between your current suppliers, current practices and properties. It's almost like supplier profiling and their performance, and apply that grid when you select new suppliers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So what next? When we went through and did the research, and certainly the conversation we've had over the last hour has pointed to a few key things for us to be thinking about as we move forward around supplier performance intelligence. Yes, there's this shift from being reactive to being proactive in terms of the exchange, and in making sure you've got the correct data infrastructure in place. We have talked about the ability, point 3, to look at creating more time. If we create simple structures, if we've got access to data, that will enable us to have more time to be able to collaborate with each other, and enable us to be more proactive as well. The application of data intelligence and supplier intelligence into negotiations and towards more performance focus is going to be critical, as is ultimately a shift in the KPIs and reward recognition for the talent and people that are involved, but also basically for basically suppliers as well, so that their performance is rewarded as well. So thanks again for the conversation. It's been a fantastic conversation. As I mentioned, much of the materials here are going to be shared. We're also sharing the full report, which is basically sits behind this, which has got research data points and a call to action within it as well. I'd like to thank the panel for your time and the interaction. We've had everything from wavelengths to 4/5/6/7 Cs as well, and I'm sure more to come as well. And some great quotes there as well. Ultimately, basically all of this we want to be sort of on demand, at our fingertips, and as simple as possible as well. So thanks again for your time, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lance. Thanks for everything.